substantially as you grow out with larger buffer zones. And I think I use this example as another one to see again how quickly you can get into large parcels that require notification. But this is the same site with a topo map, and so you can see, as I mentioned, this is oak woodlands, and a very not atypical. And so you have a ridge line here, and you've got potential for notification over the top of a hill to a residence. Is that what we're trying to do? Is that what we want to accomplish just because we've developed a 300-foot line or 660-foot line? I think it's important to consider these unique differences as we go county by county, and you can see how that changes with and how many homes and sites that get brought into this. What we might do if this were an application and this is sort of a downhill, it's flatter but downhill, if there were residents here that was outside of the buffer zone, we might require notification just because of its proximity and being downhill. But we certainly wouldn't require the same thing over the top of a hill or a ridge line. And I have this slide to make the point that this wasn't a unique site. So this is the site that I was just showing you. And you can see all these sites are agricultural parcels within this oak woodland in North County. And this represents the pink parcels here, or reddish parcels, are in this particular year, and I think it was 2014, had strawberries on their restricted materials permit. So those are highlighted. The green had vegetable crops, and the purple had both things on their permit. But I can assure you that if this were 2014, that slide would look different in 2013 in terms of the parcels that might be in strawberries. This is typical rotation between strawberries and vegetable crops in Monterey County. So you can see that you can pick any one of these parcels and have those kinds of challenges. More residences here, but all these are speckled residences. And so when we talk about notification, it's important to consider this kind of a site. Another view of it where you can see kind of from a topo standpoint, how far do we want to go and how big is that notification site. And to kind of start wrapping up, I wanted to give an overview of Monterey County, and this is our agricultural parcels. Some on the coast are actually cattle ranches, but primarily I want to bring attention to the Salinas Valley in our North County, which I showed you this portion and another in the previous slides. This is the agricultural sort of regions or parcels of the Monterey County, and you can see the cities going down. This is Highway 101, and you can see where agriculture is located, and it does abut residential neighborhoods and urban areas. And if we start to look at notification, we put, some have even called on notification or buffers or distances of a half a mile. So this represents a half a mile distance around the perimeter of our agricultural parcels. And that's a 1 mile overlay. And you can quickly see how big we can get quickly if we start talking about notification from a broad standpoint. And what is it that we want to accomplish? How much do we want people to know? I think we have a responsibility to inform, but we want to be careful about informing those that don't want to know or creating some other challenges. And another thing that's important, and I failed to mention, I'll just say it because of this slide, is county lines. When we start talking about, we have a good working relationship with our county to the north, Santa Cruz, and we have agriculture that crosses into both counties. When we start developing notification into another county, it creates some additional challenges that I think are important to recognize. We work closely with Santa Cruz County, and we can work through those things, but it is an additional challenge that we face. And so as we talk about broad notification or transparency, we have a right to farm ordinances, many counties do, and there's information generally about practices around agriculture. It's important that we consider this as a way to notify folks, but it isn't the way that's going to provide time-specific, site-specific notification, and I think that's what we're talking about here. So sort of in closing, I think it's very important to consider and define the regulatory purpose for this. What are we trying to do? How do we expect to accomplish that? We need to be clear about the roles of all the various players in this, Obviously, I'm giving the perspective of a county agricultural commissioner and looking at how we use our resources and making sure that we use those effectively. And of course, DPR is the one that's going to establish this, and so they need to own these requirements. They need to consider these unique situations in various counties. And then we're going to have to make sure that we're real clear with the growers and applicators and those that have to abide by those, because there's going to be a need for outreach, education, and we certainly need to consider all those aspects. I really urge the department to look at, the enforceability. As we start to do this, how can we enforce it? And Randy had it in one of his slides, difficult sites to notify, or what are the methods to do that? And are we doing this in lieu of monitoring? Are we doing it because of risk mitigation? Or are we doing it for communities' right to know? And all those have various purposes, and we just need to be very clear about what we're doing, and certainly let's make these things, any regulations, practical. Consider, the enforcement expectations. I think I mentioned we had 335 site plans that we worked on last year, about 900 applications. If we're going to require notification for each of those applications, or some number of those, what's the expectation in terms of inspections for us to do? If we were to do 10% and check on proper notification, that'd be 90 to do. And I'll tell you, these are not things that take an hour. These things are complex and take a long time if you've got to go knock on doors or send out a letter. If you did just 5%, we're talking about 45. And so it's real important to make this practical and reasonable and enforceable. Consider county borders, I mentioned, and let's manage our balance, sort of the transparency and right to know, with desensitizing. I think we're all familiar with Prop 65 and a well-intentioned, but probably is one that we're desensitized to at this point. When you see these kinds of labels, we want to make sure that we're informing those that need to know, that want to know, and that can use that information, and not creating some notification that people are just going to ignore into the future. Let's make sure we have the right purpose and the right reasons, and we make it practical. So I'll stop there.
All right, so are there any clarifying questions for Eric?
If they're all, I'll turn them over to Ruben. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so our next presentation will be, we have two more. We have the growers, and then we'll have the NGOs. And so for the growers, it's going to be Dave Phippen and Mike Milano. Do you guys, as you come up, I'd introduce you, but I don't have anything to say other than I have been to Mike's flower farm. So you're a flower producer? I think that came out. Flower grower? Flower farmer, okay. All right, depends. Rancher. All right, and so I'll let you guys start off and just introduce yourself, please. You have to turn it on.
Okay. That was a great presentation just before, so I want to thank you very much for really highlighting what we're all looking at and what we're faced with today. My name's Mike Milano. I'm a third-generation flower farmer. Our family farms cut flowers in North San Diego County, so it's a fairly urban area. By way of background, I'm a graduate of UC Riverside, where I got both my bachelor's degree and my PhD, working in plant pathology with many of the professors and researchers that have done extensive amount of work with fumigants, including methyl bromide, chloropicrin, 1,3-D, Vapam, so on and so forth. In my tenure, actually in my time, I grew up on a small farm in a town called Dairy Valley, which is in South LA County, very near Knott's Berry Farm. And it was called Dairy Valley for a good reason. There was nothing but dairies and chicken farms out there, and a few of us flower farmers. Over the years, houses came in, pushed things around. Ultimately, the city changed their name to Cerritos because Dairy Valley wasn't cool, and the farms moved and relocated. So, I'm very well versed. I've seen firsthand what the impact of movement of public into farming communities can do. In 1968, our family relocated our farms to North San Diego County. And, no surprise, but the same kind of thing is happening in North San Diego County. A lot of houses are extensively moving into the region. We've been farming there since 1968, quite a while. And so we're having to evolve. We're having to evolve due to the pressures from the urban population, and we're having to evolve based on the regulations that we're faced with now as a result of that urban population and as a result of the more extensive knowledge we've gathered through scientific research and development. Our family has been farming flowers a long time. My grandfather started our business in 1925, so we're going on 90 years. A lot of generations, a lot of activity, a lot of crops. We're to the point now in San Diego County where we're farming 400 acres on 2 sites. We employ about 250 individuals, 150 to 175 farm workers. Our crops are cut flowers. We're very, very diverse. We have over 50 different things that we're growing at any one point in time, and it's very, very market target specific. Okay. First and foremost, as farmers, we are fundamentally concerned and conscious of the safety of our workers, of the public, and of the environment. We intend to farm for a long time. We're not there to fly in, fly out, and have issues. So we're very, very cognizant of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and who we're impacting when we do our practices. You know, California has the strictest regulations in the nation. We all know that. We're the leaders in that. You know, whether we, as farmers as a collective, embrace that or acknowledge that or relish that, you know, there's always those challenges that we're faced with in being leaders of the pack. You know, today the regulations that we're faced with when it comes to fumigants have been established very well. We have buffer zones. We have inner buffer zones. We have outer buffer zones. We have special buffer zones. We have circumstances where we apply these fumigants based on weather conditions and site locations and so on and so forth. The one thing that's very, very certain in this is these regulations have been based on extensive scientific analysis and complementing that with risk assessment and how it impacts the public and the surrounding neighbors. So we already have very extensive rules and regulations that minimize the concerns that the public should have around the usage of the materials we're talking about. The layers that we're adding here of notification and so on and so forth are additional layers that go beyond, in my opinion, the sound science that has determined what that buffer zone needs to be to ensure that the public does not have a risk associated with that fumigation. That doesn't mean that risk doesn't exist. We all recognize that there's things that happen, accidents that go into play that can impact the circumstances, but that's been taken into account with the risk assessment models. Now, it was very well outlined what we have to go through as producers in order to do a fumigation. We have to get a restricted materials permit. We have to have a site evaluation. We have to fill out a mountain of paperwork when it comes time to do the actual application. The county ag department comes out and inspects and ensures that we're in compliance and we're ready to go. And all those things ensure that we are knowledgeable, we're understanding what our obligations are, and that we're ready to do the job right. Okay? You know, in the meantime, as all this has been going on relative to fumigants, again, through extensive research and development with the university system and others, the application of fumigants has gotten safer and safer and more effective and more efficient. The advancement in plastics alone has been tremendous. We're now using what's called totally impermeable films in many of our applications. That means that the fumigants are not evoluting off the site and impacting the public. So those advances are going on daily, weekly, monthly, annually, and being taken into consideration. And sometimes those advances in science are happening so fast that DPR and EPA have challenges in keeping up with the changes that those advances mean to us as farmers and how to incorporate those as quickly as possible so we can do a better job. Okay? All these things these requirements are in place to prevent exposure to the neighbors, to our workers, and to the environment. Okay? One of the main things that I think as producers we are fearful of is the fear that's generated around the usage of these materials. Notifying the neighbors in many instances, you have probably 90 or 95% of the people that they're not going to care. Doesn't matter. Maybe it's even higher than that. But that 1%, that is concerned for some reason can really slow down the process. They can have questions. They can slow down a fumigation. They can delay an application, which creates the chain reaction on down the stream. And so any notification that we do, we have to keep that in mind. The unintended consequences of that notification, who it's going to impact, how it's going to impact them. We've seen it time and again. The public, well-intended, gloms onto one shred of truth. And then emotionally, they connect a whole bunch of other dots to that shred of truth till it becomes a very explosive issue. And I think we really want to be careful that we don't allow that to happen. Not that it's the same, but I know that recently here across at the Capitol, they've been debating the issue of vaccinations. And not to tie vaccinations to this, but you have a very small population of people that don't believe in vaccinations. And they've allowed that to explode and get bigger and bigger because people haven't counteracted that until now where there's a crisis. We don't want to be in a crisis. We don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we're having to react to public opinion and pull back the chains in a fashion that is negative, okay? As the public goes, just one experience we had on our own farm was years ago we had a neighbor where we periodically were doing aerial applications, and we still do for some problems. The neighbor, when they'd see the helicopter flying, immediately the next day would get sick, and they started complaining to the ag commissioner. And so we had to deal with that on a regular basis. We notified them, a variety of practices that we implemented to help minimize their concerns, and the complaints wouldn't stop. So finally, one time, in conjunction with our ag commissioner, we decided to fly the helicopter with water in it. And lo and behold, the neighbor got sick. And it's that psychological component of the connecting of the dots to pesticides, to fumigants. And that's all you need is that trigger that gets them into a mode where they're not reacting to what's actually the issue. They're reacting to a psychological need or concern. So I think it's really important that we keep that in perspective and that we're careful that anything we do here does not aggravate that any further than it already has been. I commented it is a concern as the public moves into their agricultural communities. Where do we draw the line? At what point do we say, we want to help, we want to protect, we want to advance, but we have a job to do, and we have to be able to do that job. And sooner or later, these kinds of things end up pushing agriculture to different zones, out of this region, out of that region, and maybe that's a natural evolution. At the same time, we're getting the message from the public that they want open space, they want farmland, they want agriculture in the communities that they're in. So where's that balance? How do we strike that balance, and how do we make this happen in the way that it's not going to please everybody, but it is going to please or get the job done in the most effective fashion? And I think, just to kind of draw things up, the other day I was on Twitter, and I saw one of those memes that came up, and I think it's real apropos, and it said, science, because figuring things out is always better than making blank up, okay? So with that, pass it over.
Well, good morning. That was excellent, Mike. Thank you. And Eric, your presentation was spot on, and you've said so much. I feel like I need to say so little because you've covered so many of the points so well. My name is Dave Phippen. I live about an hour south of here in a small community called Ripon, and I've lived there all my life, along with my wife. And we're an almond producing company. We farm almonds exclusively. I happily represent the third generation of from the family when my grandfather immigrated here from the Netherlands. We're farming small parcels from 20 acres to 40 acres. Once in a while we get an 80, not that often. And I'm proud to say that these are parcels that my grandfather farmed, my uncles and aunts farmed, and a lot of good neighbors and friends farmed. Something my grandfather instilled in all of us very early in our lives, there were a lot of grandchildren in our family, was that people come and go, but the land stays. And I think Grandpa really instilled a respect for us to respect the land and to remember that what you do to that land has lasting effects on people long after you've moved on. And we feel that responsibility. I farm in partnership with my cousin, Bud Travail. That was my grandfather's name, and also with my younger brother, Scott. So there's three of us that started a company in 1980 called Travail and Phippen. We farm in partnership. We're a family operation, and I'm proud to say that that partnership actually was the beginning, or with the end of my father farming in partnership with the uncles, and we've gone on. They used to farm other crops beside almonds. We are exclusive to almonds. We also provide hulling and shelling facilities and processing for other almond growers up and down the state. So I think I can speak fairly well for the many growers that aren't here, and I would share with you at this moment that you see me here. I'm one of the older farmers, and in the farming industry, you talk about those who can do and those who can't go to DPR meetings. So I'm that second part. So I want to mention to you that there are just a great number of young farmers that are busy on the ranches today and aren't able to come to these talking point groups, but I want you to know they're all concerned, they're all watching. This affects, as Mike mentioned, this affects the future of farming in California. So that's a little about who we are and what we do. I think always in my farming career, we've been very concerned and very cautious with using agricultural crop protection chemicals. We wear the proper equipment that we're required to wear. We hire the right kind of people if it's something that goes beyond us. In our farming company, we've actually started what's the beginning of the next partnership. We've taken on my son-in-law and my cousin's nephew, and I hope my son's going to be part of that group eventually. But within that group, we have 2 certified pest control operators. They have the badges and the licenses issued by DPR, and you're looking at an old farmer here that actually has an applicator's license, also issued by DPR. So I think we have a good understanding of what the rules and regulations are, and we know how to handle these chemicals. You know, to further go for safety for the public, we are under the auspices of DPR. So we do use soil fumigants. I mentioned that we are exclusively almond growers, and the average life of an almond orchard today is about 25 to 30 years. So we're rotating those little parcels I mentioned that my grandfather used to farm, not every year, but quite frequently. So I've had a lot of experience with soil fumigation. We're proud to say that we've never had an accident, we've never had an incident, we've never had the chemical escape our ranch and endanger other folks. And I think that goes to the credibility of DPR and the protocols that are set up for soil fumigation at this point in time. California, as mentioned earlier, is the leader in the nation. We established buffer zones. We had them before anybody else did. Eric, you did a wonderful job of showing how those buffer zones travel from our property and onto other properties. We respect that. We respect the rights of the neighbors. I just think we have an impeccable record so far of safe soil fumigation. So I'm wondering why the necessity to go into this notification. One thing, if there's a burr in my saddle about DPR, they use sound science, but then they double it, triple it, quadruple it, go 100 times. And I think many of you know that. So when you have that much sound science, what's really the concern about this notification? So that's one of the things I'd like to implore on you, that the safety of the people is first and foremost in our minds, and we think we're there. We think we're achieving that. I'd like to talk a little bit about who lives on or near our properties. My wife and I built a home in 1980 on one of our properties. It's inserted about 300 feet off the county road into the ranch. Do you think I'm a little bit concerned about safety? I raised my 3 children there. We're pretty cognizant of what happens on that property. Many of my farm workers live on these properties, and I'll talk a little about the folks that work for us, just to explain that we are very concerned about those folks. The longest employee we have at Travail and Phippen is 84 years old, I believe, this year. He was first hired by my now deceased uncle, who was a partner in the first partnership. Christopher Rodriguez also lives on one of our properties in a guest home adjacent to my cousin and partner Bud Travail's home. That man has lived his entire life pretty much on our parcels. Another longtime employee, Felix Garcia, lives on one of our, what we call the home ranch. Felix helped my wife and I raise our twins when they were first born, and now we're reciprocating and helping Felix raise 3 children on the very ranch and the home that I was raised with my siblings on. I bring these points up to just impress on you that we care about the folks, and we're very concerned about if there were dangers. We mitigate those dangers and do everything in our capacity to mitigate any risk that would be placed on them. Also, we have a few neighbors. Most of them in my lifetime are fellow farmers, so they know very well what we're up to and why we're doing it. They're quite familiar with the ag commissioners. They're quite familiar with DPR. They don't really feel a lot of risk when we do soil fumigation, but little by little, Mike spoke about urban folks moving into our area, and we do have a lot of ranchettes now adjoining some of our properties. These folks want to get out in the country and enjoy the life that my wife and I enjoyed raising our children out there, and so we're starting to get a little bit away from some of the folks that understand the needs of soil fumigants and that it's really quite safe the way we do it. So I was going to talk next about the actual application. I think it's been covered very well up to this point, but something I didn't hear said real well was the fumigant management plan that we established before we go to the Ag Commissioner. When we get to the Ag Commissioner's office, we have that thing. Excuse me. We okay? When we get to the Ag Commissioner's office to ask for the permit, first of all for the restricted material and then for the application site, we have a whole stack of paperwork in our hands, and it covers everything from soil temperature, soil moisture content, what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate. We talk about inversion layers, we talk about wind, we talk about all the factors that would impact the safety of the actual fumigation chute when we do it. The Ag Commissioner in our county sends somebody out to ascertain if we've got it right. They look at the exposures and the dangers. They look to see if there's any residents that weren't mentioned that were in the buffer zone or near the buffer zone. They do a very thorough job of covering our paperwork, and believe me, they've got my cell phone number. They call me and let me know if I missed something, and then we start over and we cover those points. When we get to the actual shoot, we hire professionals, and they come out very well prepared. They've been in the application process, and of course they do this every day, so they're well informed of what the risks are, what the mitigation measures are. Obviously, we're limited by weather on the day of the shoot, and if the weather isn't the way it needs to be, if there's too much wind or the inversion isn't right, we stop the shoot and delay until it is right. And we don't take chances. Sometimes we use the films that Mike talked about, and yes, we're seeing the new films now, and they're quite impressive. We do a lot of shoots with Telone, and that usually doesn't require a film. We're doing a little bit of chloropictrin. So I think we've got a really, really good handle on the way we're applying soil fumigations at this point. I'd like to talk just briefly about what I think the concerns might be, although Eric did a good job of doing it already. We have great trust with our neighbors, our farm workers, our family members, all the people that would be impacted by the soil fumigation shoots that we do. I'm wondering if we go beyond the buffer zone now and we place door hangers notifying people that we're going to use some chemical that they may have never heard about. They really don't know all the risks. Yes, we'll give them information to look it up. Is that really going to instill more confidence in them, or is it going to delete or deplete the confidence that they've had in our good safety factors, the Ag Commissioner's safety factors, DPR's 100 or 1,000 times what science told us to do safety factors? I think it's going to cause a lot of questions and concerns. So I really think this notification, although I think the notification is probably going to do more harm than good. So I think Eric covered it very well. I think we need to be concerned. We need to look deeper. And I would caution those of you that think this is a good idea to look further, because it will distill confidence in people. Thank you very much.
Is there any clarification questions? Sir, can you please, just in case we're not online, right? We are. Oh, we are. There you go. You're speaking to the world.
I think some of what you're saying is right. This is harm. The harm is not notifying people.
Would you like me to answer or respond?
Briefly, the clarification.
Yeah, well, the harm, he's saying the harm of notifying people. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, notifying people. That's what I'm saying.
So just real briefly, sir, thank you for the question, first of all. What I'm concerned about is making people more aware of what we're doing and more concerned. We've got 1,000 times factor of safety with the science that we know now. I'm worried that we're going to instill a lack of confidence in what we're doing, and that would impact, if they had concerns, as Mike mentioned earlier, we might lose our deadlines and have to re-notify and re-notify. And if you're in a more populous area, it could be very problematic. Thank you for the question.
Brian, could I just ask a question about that 1,000?
Can you come on up to the...
I'm just interested in that 1,000-time factor of safety, if you could talk through that, where that comes from.
Yeah, well, it came right out of my mouth, and you heard it and you caught it, so good for you for catching it. I'm not sure it's 1,000 times, but from a farmer's perspective, it seems like 1,000 times. I'll tell you what, it's several times. Whatever the safety factor is, it's many, many times. So thank you for catching that.
Okay, all right. We have our next panel, which is Tracy Brieger and Ann Catton. Ann is with California, I guess CRLA, I get to California. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself. All right, thank you all for coming up. Thank you guys for the presentation.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Brian. My name's Tracy Brieger, and I am one of the co-directors of Californians for Pesticide Reform, which is a statewide coalition of about 190 member organizations across California. And Ann Catton is with California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. We'll test you on it later. So I just wanted to quickly say thank you to so many people who I know who've traveled so far, and to all those who couldn't be here, especially the folks who I know are listening through interpreters. So thank you very much to DPR for arranging interpretation. Thank you to our interpreters. And just they should wave me down if I'm speaking too fast, because I know I often do that. But thanks to all those. I know it's really, really hard to listen to presentations, especially hours worth through interpretation. And just as I mentioned, CPR is a coalition of 190 member organizations, but I just wanted to point out that there is sort of no one NGO perspective. There are many, and so there are, farm workers might have different concerns than teachers, and so we'll try to hit some points, but of course it's great that DPR is going to take this across the state to address other concerns. So, excellent. So we're here today because fumigants do pose a threat to community health. As people, Randy outlined this really well. They're highly volatile, highly toxic, used in massive quantities. And as such, they can move off-site easily and pose a significant poisoning risk. And that's why we're here today. We're here today, and we really appreciate DPR's efforts to develop standard notification for fumigant use, ultimately to protect community health. So Eric asked the question, to what end? And it's about protecting community health. So to start, is this a problem? I think some growers have asked the problem. Is this actually a problem? Is there a problem here? And we would say absolutely there is. This isn't just a theoretical issue. This isn't just about scientific studies of the health effects of pesticides. What we can see is that there are many documented illnesses from fumigants. And I just want to point out that before I start any of this, before I talk about illnesses or air monitoring results, that this can happen even when growers are doing the right thing, when they're using the required tarps, when they have the required buffer zones. So I just want to be really clear that this isn't about growers doing anything wrong. In many cases, this is about the nature of fumigants and the kinds of materials that they are, that they can be doing everything right and everything that's required of them, and that there still can be very significant community health impacts. So as you can see, at least 30 fumigant drift incidents affected over 800 people from 2003 to 2012. And I just wanted to pull out some particular incidences here. I'm not going to go through all these, and you're going to have to blink again. Hopefully nobody is prone to seizures. So there's a few incidents here. They're Central Coast ones. Hopefully this will come back up. Oh, you guys can see it. Anyway, I'm not going to go through these one by one. I'm just going to hit some top points anyway. All right, so one of the things that you can see or not see in these list of poisonings, so we can't see it anymore, but I can look up there. Okay, great. Is that there are many documented community and farm worker poisonings across the state. And I just want to also highlight, too, that even though there's a stat on, 30 incidents, 800 people, those are only the reported incidents, and those really are only the tip of the iceberg. We know from talking to community members, very, very, very many incidents go unreported. So we just want to highlight that also. But of these incidences here, there's only 4. It's a sort of it's a small sample of the many incidences that have happened. But I want to pull out a few important things. Number one, the distance at which these illnesses occurred. So as you may or may not see, all of these incidences happened at distances over a quarter mile from fields. All of them. So that's a thing. In fact, some of them happened up to 2 to 3 miles from fields, and people were still getting sick. So I think we just really need to think about that when we think about what distances are required for adequate notification. The other thing I just wanted to pull out is the places where these happened. Schools were affected, businesses were affected, other farm workers in adjacent fields were affected. So this is affecting actually a fairly broad swath of the community. And the other thing I wanted to pull out, the third point of these incidences, are that they happened outside of business hours. And this is a very, very big challenge in terms of poisoning incidents and reporting an adequate response. As we know, the county ag commissioners, as Eric said, their workload's really hard, they work really hard, and they work between business hours in a lot of cases. And so this has been an ongoing, almost perpetual issue, has been what happens after hours and on weekends. And so, we believe that notification could actually help emergency crews have access in a more timely way to information that they need to treat incidences when they happen outside of business hours. And they regularly happen outside of business hours. So, right, it's up. So, next slide. So, in addition to establishing the problem that there are reported illness incidences, I'd also like to just pull out about that air monitoring does confirm that fumigant concentrations in the air are above target levels, above DPR's target public health levels. So even with those, however many times protection, we'd love to see it be 1,000. So Randy, if you could drop the numbers for that, that'd be great. But even at the levels of protection such as they are, we are finding concentrations of fumigants in the air above those levels. And this is just to point out, too, that there are serious chronic health effects. Sometimes people say, what happens immediately? But there are health effects that are happening even if nobody's having an acute reaction. So one quick example, chlorpicrin is the highest used pesticide within a quarter mile of Monterey County schools. And there's an air monitor at the Salinas airport, which is actually further away from the fields than many schools and homes. And in 2013, the levels of chlorpicrin in the air exceeded DPR's target levels by 40%. This is a problem. So I just want to pull it out here that in addition to the strong scientific studies that we have about the health effects of fumigants, we have illness data that we've taken a quick peek at here. We have air monitoring data. All of these establish that there is a problem with fumigant use next to community members and near community members. And I want to highlight again, that's even when growers are following all the rules they're supposed to. So we really do need to take stronger action. So as we also know about California, it's very unique. It's not like many other places in the country. We always hear that California has the strongest laws in the nation, and it's like, well, we need them, and we need more than are currently on the books. Because if you can look at this one picture here, that's McKinnon School in Salinas. There's a fumigation happening right across the street. That's the danger sign. It's a chlorpicrin fumigation. That's very close to the school. So California has unique situations in terms of populations right next to fields, and we need to be cognizant of that. So how will notification help? We do believe that notification will help community members protect their health. It will protect illnesses, both immediate illnesses. It'll help prevent illnesses, hopefully help prevent chronic health impacts and improve emergency response. Notifying people lets them take simple precautions. Closing the windows, maybe not being outside for a couple days afterwards, not letting their kids play outside, maybe not having practice of, like football practice outside in the athletic field that's right next to the fumigation for a couple days afterwards. It gives people the ability to make a choice. And also, if in an extreme situation, if someone has serious health issues, and if they have the ability, it even gives them the choice to perhaps not be in the area. Not everyone's able to make that choice, but some people might be able to be. So Also, another point about notification is that it will make it easier to identify the cause of illness symptoms and get appropriate medical treatment. So this, last thing, just before handing it off to Ann, we do believe this is a good time, and I know there's the issue of workload at the county ag commissioners, but maybe DPR can help with that. But we do think this is a great time also for the county ag commissioners to improve their after hours and weekend reporting, because as fumigation happens outside of hours, and there might be more questions. So we really need we need a solution that isn't about people calling 911, because in most cases we just know that that's not going to happen, especially if people don't have health care. It's just going to be too expensive and prohibitive. So I think that's another piece that we need to work on. So just to say that, as Randy noted, there are methyl bromide notifications already. We believe our recommendation is to improve on these, for example, making a much larger notification zone of maybe 1 mile. Oh, and actually Ann's going to go through the rest of this. There you go.
Okay, yeah. Good morning, and thank you very much for hosting us. Yeah, in addition to having a much larger notification zone than the 300 feet, probably 1 mile, and Tracy went over how we got to that. We envision improving on the methyl bromide notification by, of course, retaining bilingual written notices, adding a graphic at the top, and deleting the pre-request requirement. We think that's just too confusing, and it's going to discriminate against people who have less education if you have a pre-request requirement. We think that retaining the model from methyl bromide of the 7-day, 48-hour, and then re-notification if there's more than a 12-hour delay is best for getting people the information. But we think, I guess in some ways we're asking for a hybridization. We think that you need to add health effects and emergency medical reimbursement information and emergency response information to the notice, and that this actually, by giving more information, it's the right thing to do for Right to Know, and it could also reduce the number of calls that the Ag Commissioner gets, because people will have more of their questions answered by the notice. And then we have an idea for notification of schools. Just because we came up with it, we'll share it today. Okay. And then just the way my mind works, I like to see it in the regulation. For the issue of making sure who gets notified, we might want to go from property operators to specify that the people on the ground, the renters, the people at the individual schools need notification. And again, we envision it would be really important to have a header with a graphic of a fumigated field and the fumigation sign, so people, take notice of the notice. They will be able to sort it out from other mail they get. And that people who receive notice should have an option of asking for supplementary notification by email or robocall for future fumigations. And this would be particularly important for people with limited English or Spanish literacy. And we think sort of an unfinished problem is figuring out a really good way to notify indigenous Mexican and Central American populations and Hmong populations who need notification in other languages that may not be written languages, and that some sort of a outreach for sign up and with robocalls might be a idea, but we need to get more information there. And again, we think the notification requirement should be sort of hybridized from the information currently required for methyl bromide and for the labels, including with the Ag Commissioners specific instructions on how we reach them night and weekend, what the contact procedure is in the county, both immediate poisoning symptoms and chronic health risks. And we think that if there is a Prop 65 listing for a pesticide, this should be included. We aren't talking about a trace amount of something in your coffee cup here. We're talking about hundreds to thousands of pounds of chemical applied in proximity, so people have a right to know that. And also with some a web address for getting the label and the safety data sheet, because this is a right to know program. and then adding the identification of the block, which is on the label, with the label emergency response requirements, and what to do if you do feel like you're getting poisoned, and again, an explanation of the emergency medical reimbursement process. And for uniformity and to lessen the load on the ag commissioners and people providing the producers, we think that this sample should be provided, should be prepared by DPR. Okay, sorry. And again, when we were talking among ourselves, we all felt like when a school is in a notification zone, we thought that the robocall systems, which most schools now use, would be a really good way to notify parents. I know my kids' schools used it for a range of types of non-emergency and emergency notifications. And again, to lessen the burden on individual schools and the ag commissioners, DPR should prepare a sample call script. With other businesses and institutions, we think they should be required to post the written notice in an accessible location and notify on-site employees, or for daycare centers, also notify the parents. If they have a robocall system, great. If it needs to be a simpler thing, there isn't a one-size-fit-all there.
Right, so there's two additional cases which we would think require notification regarding fumigant use, in addition to just notification before each and every fumigant application. So the two additional places where we strongly recommend having required notification are, as I mentioned before, air monitoring. When air monitoring shows elevated concentrations of fumigants in the air, local residents and local decision makers have the right to know that. This isn't, again, just a theoretical exercise. These are the people who are actually on the front lines of breathing the air that have elevated levels. So it's really important that within 3 weeks to a month of when DPR or ARB receives results and looks at the monitoring and realizes that there are elevated concentrations of fumigants above DPR target levels in the air, that very soon the local county boards of supervisors, county ag commissioners, county departments of public health, residences, schools, should all be notified about this. They have the right to know that. We see right now there's issues in Ventura County where where the local officials are just finding out now, sometimes in some cases years after monitoring took place, and they're not very happy about it, nor should they be. That people do have a right to know. This is about basic accountability and transparency, as Eric noted. So the second place where we do believe notification regarding fumigant use should be required is when fumigant use caps are exceeded. And again, the notification should happen immediately when the data is received to all of those boards of supervisors, county ag commissioners, departments of public health, residences, schools, and such. And just to note, I know that there was a lot of discussion about the challenges with notification. Some of those challenges are very real, but that's not a reason to not do them. I feel very confident that, not only from a technological point of view in terms of fixes, but, in terms of human capacity to solve problems, these are inherently solvable problems. They're both real and solvable. And that, we are in a day and age where we walk around with basically baby computers in our pockets. We have the ability to solve the kinds of problems that have arisen, and they're real, so we should look at them. But none of these, as far as I can see, none of the particular challenges that were raised are reasons to not take action and not to move forward. And just, I do want to highlight that, we did definitely see this will increase workload on county ag commissioners. So we're interested in working with county ag commissioners and DPR to figure out what would support them in making this possible, because that's a very real concern. So just in closing, though, we wanted to point out that as long as fumigants are in use, and again, not because of individual farmers, certainly not malice, usually not error, things happen and fumigants get into the air. That's the nature of fumigants, right? They're gases. It's going to happen. And so we wanted to note that as long as they are in use, absolutely we need these mitigations. We need these protection measures. We need buffer zones. We need notification. But no amount of tarps and no amount of buffer zones and no amount of notification is actually going to decrease the risk to community members to a point that's actually acceptable. And the only way to actually do that is to remove the source of exposure. And so over the, near term, we'd like to see this as soon as possible, is what we really need to do is work towards transitioning off of fumigants. And honestly, that's where I'd rather spend our time talking, because that's what we actually need to be aiming for. So what does that look like? The state of California needs to invest into research into safer replacements for fumigants, long-term plant breeding, extension efforts, direct support for growers to make the transition. For those, because nobody here wants farming to go out of business. Everybody wants farmers to continue to stay profitable and grow the food that this country and this state needs. But we also need to do it in a way that doesn't compromise community health. And I feel very confident that we can do both. I mean, if we could agree that we can do both, and I think we all can and should agree that we can all do both, then we can put our efforts into solving that problem. So we can and we must support growers to reach a healthy, profitable, fumigant-free future, so that growers have a real choice and don't have to use fumigants to keep growing their crops. And that's where we'd like to see more effort be placed too. And we know DPR, we also like to recognize the efforts. DPR has been moving more in that direction over the last little bit, and we really appreciate it, and need, more needs to be done. So I think, let's aim for a fumigant-free future by 2020. Maybe we can aim for that. In any event, we can't delay. So thank you. I guess we'll take clarifying questions. But yeah.
Yes, I'm a I'm a watermelon grower out of San Joaquin County, and I like your closing statements about finding a fumigant-free environment, but I'm kind of curious is where the funding is going to come from to create that non-fumigant utopia that you speak of, because at this point, fumigation is vital to my operation, and I would willingly non-fumigate if there was funding and such like that. So I'm just kind of curious what funding and where's that going to come from?
And can I just say, I think your perspective is really important, because I believe that most growers are coming from the same place that you're coming from. They don't want to use this stuff. They're using it because they feel like they have to right now. So I don't know, Brian, if you want to answer the funding question, but I know that... But, I mean, short answer is I know we helped work with DPR over the last budget cycle of the state budget to get $1.8 million more of research invested into fumigant replacement research. And I understand that those are currently field trials. They're not, they're not necessarily ready to hit the ground with every grower immediately, but I think we need to be creative. I think there's some money in the state budget, and we need to work together to find those places to fund it.
Any more clarifying questions before I move to the plan?
Thank you. Good morning. Bob Weimer from Merced County. Actually, I'm an organic grower as well as a commercial grower, so I have experience in both sides. But the question one is that a moment ago, one of the speakers was questioned about it 1,000 times. I have a question about your use of unconfirmed, incidents that go unreported. How does that play into this picture? The other one is that the statistics that you use, did you analyze those that shows that we're showing less and less incidents as the population increases and fumigation as a decline in these numbers? I see we showed back to a certain date, and we haven't had a lot of instances with this. So looking at your data, if you would clarify that. And then the biological side of it, as Mr. Bradgradian brought up, is I've worked extensively with these, and I'd like to know what your alternatives are.
Well, to work backwards, it would be great to have a discussion about alternatives. I just don't think we have time today, though. So one is anaerobic soil disinfestation. As far as the numbers, I think for acute illnesses, the numbers have been going down as restrictions have gone into place. We're still, but they still occur, and they occur more to farm workers and in poor rural neighborhoods near the field. So that's why it's I mean, it's a concern to us if anyone gets immediate poisoning. And in addition, there is chronic health risk. There's unfortunately increasing information about telone air levels that through our analysis, we are very concerned that they show increased cancer risk in, areas near, but not too near to the field, so within a township. And then as far as the underreporting, yeah, you can't quantify what isn't there. We are drawing this qualitatively from what we hear from people in communities who are reluctant to go get medical care because they don't have health insurance or they have a high copay and things like that. So it is a qualitative statement.
Yeah, and the relevance of just noting that there are unreported illnesses is just to remind everyone to not take the reported numbers as the sum total of illnesses that are happening. And so I think we always put that qualifier there because we do know we've done surveys of community members in Tulare County and other places asking people if they've ever been affected, had certain symptoms from being exposed to pesticides from working in the fields. And many people have said yes, and the vast majority of people have never reported. They don't even know who to report to. I think we had one case where 95% of people said they didn't know who to report to. The 5% that did were incorrect. So almost nobody in these cases have heard of their county ag commissioner, and a lot of county ag commissioner staff don't have bilingual staff, so couldn't even take a report if necessary. So we see many barriers to reporting. So the significance, because you asked the significance of mentioning unreported illness incidents, and the significance is just to point out that it's not, that the reported incidents are not the sum total. And I'd like to point out that neither Ann nor I are the experts on that front. There are a number of people in this room who have probably been made ill by pesticides a number of times and never reported it. And so I think, a lot of the community members here, I think, did you see you're in Merced? I mean, maybe we should have a conversation with some folks and just get together and talk about how, what the community and the farm worker experience is of being around pesticides and honestly very, very seldom reporting when things happen.
Thank you all very much. So, okay. Now is this on? We're going to go to public comment. I thought it was. Okay. So we have, thank you. We're going to go to public comments. We have 17 individuals who have requested to make a comment. We'll read off your name. Please come up, repeat your name. If you have an affiliation, please do that. And then be mindful of the 3-minute rule. You can do less if you want. And remember, this is about notification. So, all right, who is first?
Brian, speaker number 1 is Tony Trigaro from the California Teachers Association.
Excellent. Tony? Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Tony Trigaro, and I'm representing 325,000 members of the California Teachers Association and the 6.2 million students that we teach. We know from personal experience at one school site in Salinas, we have lost 7 teachers in 3 years from cancer. We know in the Central Valley we have track teams that can't practice due to the drift of airborne contaminants at their school site during track season. We fervently believe that notification of people who live and go to school and work in fields is important, and that it will help to prevent illnesses and reduce chronic health risks. We also believe that notification to school sites in the same manner that robocalls are made now is an important strategy that would assist all the community in resulting in better services. As a native Californian and a person whose family immigrated here from the Central and landed in the Central Valley, we still have property there that when I was a child was surrounded by nothing. And now there's homes and schools around them. That's not at the fault of the population, but it's something that has to be dealt with. No one wants to see agriculture leave this country. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Tony, my parents are retired teachers, so you carry a lot of weight. Who's our next speaker?
Brian, our next speaker is Tara Brown from the Office of Assembly D.S. Williams' office.
Hi, my name's Tara Brown, and I'm from the Office of Assemblymember Williams, and the Assemblymember asked me to make a brief comment today. So, dear Director Leahy, I'm writing to encourage the Department of Pesticide Regulations to expand notification rules for all fumigants in California. I represent areas in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties, which are known for their agricultural production, especially strawberries, lemons, and avocados. Areas in and adjacent to my district have been the site of extreme health effects due to fumigants, especially in nearby public schools and for staff. Significant and rigorous notification is needed in these communities, and it must be automatic, bilingual, well in advance of application, and widespread to warn all affected areas. There should be a right to know in these areas, and not just emergency response information if something does go wrong. The state must also work closely with local agencies in that they can properly communicate their constituents and take actions if necessary. And finally, just notifying people of the risk of fumigants is not a long-term strategy. We must work to phase out these toxic chemicals and transition into safer alternatives. Thank you for your attention on this issue, and I encourage you to seek the broad stakeholder input around the state and communities that are affected. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Our next speaker is Carolina Martinez from Valmar Farms.
Okay.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak here today. A lot of the topics and items that I was going to mention have already been brought up this morning. I'm a farmer that we're located just south of Batesville. We farm about 2,500 acres of watermelons, carrots, sweet potatoes, amongst other crops, and we do use fumigants. If there was an option available to us, we wouldn't use these fumigants, and we would definitely use more safer products to do that. But unfortunately, that's what we have to deal with at this time. And if there was more funding, like the previous watermelon grower said, there would be an opportunity there for us to be able to take care of that. But as the matter stands right now, within our county of Kern County, we have stricter rules than the EPA rules or the California Ag that were listed up there. And one of the things that I got from Eric's presentation there is that he makes his plan based on what the different topographies, the different sites, the different areas that we have to deal with. Same thing with our ag commissioner. And just because the general rule is set up, it is not all bearing to where it encompasses all in the same general sense. And one of the things I have to commend our ag commissioners and Kern County Ag Commissioner's Office is that they set up rules to be able for us to comply with, and some of the buffer zones are even different from the ones that were listed before. So one of the things I want to mention is that it's something that we as growers, we want to be able to farm, we want to be able to farm productively and actually create a crop. One of the depictions up there that we saw earlier was the strawberry being produced, and just think of all those inputs that went into that strawberry field didn't end up producing anything. And that isn't good for other resources that we're using, such as water and other things that are doing. So we do need different solutions, but meanwhile, within what we're doing here recently and within Kern County anyways, we've had a good policies in place, and here for the last 2 years, we haven't had any drift incidences, and that's something that we are very proud of. And we value our employees, we value our neighbors, we want to continue farming. It's something that we think here in the state, we know that we're up against the highest restrictions of regulatory burdens and all that type of stuff. But eventually, there's a tipping point. There is a tipping point. And if we here in the state value that and value us producing crops that are nutritious for us and help us be able to move our society forward, we have to be cognizant of that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. And next
is Stan Lester from Lester Farms.
Okay, Stan.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Stan Lester. I farm about 45 minutes to the west of here in a town called Winters. I am a small family farm. I farm about 600 acres of walnuts and other tree crops, but mostly walnuts. Our area's been farming in trees since John Wilkesville came to this area in the 1850s. So some of our soils have been in tree crops for 150 years plus. And so over the years, they develop quite a population of things like nematodes. And so what we've had to do is go through and take these trees out and row crop other things for a couple of years and then treat with fumigation. This notification thing, right now, we have to create, as been mentioned, a fumigant management plan. This in itself is quite a job. And some of these folks ought to really try to look at these forms and see how difficult it is. But for a small farmer like myself to even do more is going to be more expensive, more liabilities, and everything else. Believe me, we want a safe environment. That's how we provide. That's how we live. That's the only way we're going to survive. We want our neighbors to be safe, and we especially want our employees to be safe. There is no question about that. So we are doing everything we can to comply with the law. The science is there. It's proven that the present situation is workable and safe. So why are we going beyond that? Where's the situation where it warrants this additional requirements? I also farm on both Yolo and Solano County. And so the issue that the Ag Commissioner brought up about notifications across county lines also becomes a huge issue. Our farms are irregular, and it's already difficult. We had, in 2013, we fumigated a 17-acre parcel. We had to have the machines go in there 3 times to fumigate 17 acres at a cost of about $2,400 an acre. I just earlier this week talked to somebody out of Florida, used the same material, everything else, $450 an acre. So we're talking about competition here, we're talking about survival. We're using 43 pounds of C35, which is a combination of telone and chlorpyrifene. We're not talking about a lot of pounds per acre. So these are just some of the facts I wanted to bring out. I don't claim to be an expert, but it's been proven by Dr. Mike McHenry that this is a procedure that we should do, and we are trying to use that protocol to survive and do a better job of growing our crops. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Stan, you were 3 minutes on the dot. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ron Rado from Rado Brothers.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present. My name is Ron Rado. I'm with Rado Brothers in Modesto. We're vegetable growers of about 40 different leafy green vegetable commodities, farming about 1,000 acres. We've been in business since 1905. My ancestors farmed in Oakland and Alameda, and we've been farming in the Modesto area since the 1960s. We are users of the soil fumigant Metam, which affects weeds, diseases, and nematodes. That's the only fumigant that I have experience with. The pests I mentioned all affect and retard the growth of the crops that we grow. It's often our best choice for diminishing those pests, and it's more efficient and effective than hand labor, mechanical, cultural, or other chemical alternatives. I would not call us Metam junkies, but we do enjoy the benefits of its use. We are not once-a-year users. We're not seasonal users. We farm year-round. We plant crops almost weekly, and we may apply Metam as often as weekly during the production season, and depending on our planting schedule and depending on the locations where we're going to plant. We're somewhat practiced at making those applications, and we're practiced at following the many rules and regulations that govern its use. New restrictions were introduced about 2 years ago. One of those changes in particular relates to field fumigation notification, which included 2 options for emergency preparedness and response measures, and response information for neighbors. The other option was site monitoring. We urge the department to consider retaining that choice of methods. Along with those other label changes that were made 2 years ago, it made metam the most heavily regulated pesticide that we use. We've trained up personnel to meet the requirements. We have 7 licensed persons on our staff that work diligently to comply with regulations. Apparently, the department would consider adding additional regulations to the use of the material. We would ask the department, what's the experience been with the product since the new label was adopted and the new regulations were put into effect? Has the use of metam improved or regressed in terms of safety considerations? Have the label changes been effective or ineffective? Is there a need to apply additional restrictions on its use? In applying the methyl bromide notification provisions, we ask what the standard would be for applying a mandatory notification regulation. As the department regulates many pesticides, how would that apply just to this category or go on to other categories of pesticides? We think that the recent metam label changes should have enhanced the safe use of material to the point where it'd be unnecessary to make those changes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Our third speaker is Kevin Pasco from Grimway Farms.
Kevin.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Pasco. I'm from Bakersfield, California, and I'm currently the Vice President of Farming for Grimway Farms. We're grower, packer, shippers, primarily of carrots for a lot of years, but in the last 10 or 12 years, we've considerably moved into the organic production. We also own and operate Cal Organic Farms. We have probably 30,000 plus acres of organic certified ground, probably grow 50 to 60 different items on those. I know, Brian, you've been down and visited with us, and on the conventional side, we are still considerable conventional farmers. We have a lot of growers that grow with us that are conventional farmers, and I know we personally have cooperated with the Department of Pesticide Regulations over the years in developing some of these buffer zones. We've used our fields, we've used the custom applicators for developing these based on what we assume is sound science. And I guess my question is, it's kind of out of the blue now that we're now wanting to impose this notification that's been in play for methyl bromide on these other fumigants that, whether it be Talone or in our case, a lot of times we use metam sodium. And what is the science that DPR is now what appears to be all of a sudden saying that we need these notifications majors? Is there anything new that we don't know about, any further studies, anything like that that indicates an increased health risk that we weren't already aware of? And I can tell you that, you know, in our state, and especially the San Joaquin Valley, and I wouldn't rule out the Salinas Valley either, but when you look at what these notifications could implicate with regard to how much acreage is lost to production because of the loss of that material, and notification doesn't increase the safety factor, but it does, I believe, increase somewhat of a fear in the minds of a lot of the residents and in adjacent fields. And if the statistics are there that indicate the risk benefit isn't there, then we need to know about it. But oftentimes farmers, we almost feel like we're demonized anymore, and that we're viewed on as people that we're trying to poison the planet, and honest to God, we aren't. But I think having a healthy, affordable food supply in this country is a benefit socially to our standard of living and to our society in general, and I'll yield my time because it's all gone.
Thank you. I like that. Where's my hammer? Who do we have? Thank you very much. Who do we have next?
Bob Weimer from Weimer Farms, California Sweet Potato Council.
Okay. So.
Morning again. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
I have three quick items. One is that we're dealing with old chemistry. And what that indicates is we're having a very difficult time finding something to replace this. I've worked with the university over the years. I've built two pieces of equipment, one for steam application, one for injecting biologicals into the soil. And we've had little to no success with these items. So we go back to the old chemistry. And we've had a lot of years of experience with this chemistry. In fact, DPR has seen me here many times before, talking to them about township caps, et cetera, et cetera. I've worked with Randy. We worked on drip irrigation and so on. And so with the old chemistry, it's we have that. That's what we have to work with. We have the experience, and it seems to be working. The second item I'd like to talk about in the sweet potato industry particularly, I'm a diversified farmer, but I do spend a lot of time there. One is the minority farmers that we're seeing showing up in the industry right now, both Hispanic, East Indian, taking on small parcels, getting involved. The complications that they run into, they're having difficulties with the system because of the complications and they're not getting the materials and the product they need because they don't know how to work with it. We add more layers to this system. I have a ranch foreman who does farm some sweet potatoes. I'm able to take care of his needs and make sure that he's fumigated or dealt with or take care of properly so he can perform. I know a lot of growers that aren't, and I'll represent those growers, and we've had 5, 10, 15, we probably have 20 to 25 growers now in a minority, small acres, and having complications, difficult in dealing with fumigants because they don't understand the process. The second one is, or the third item I'd like to talk about is that, and everybody's broached it already, I have with me the documentation. I did a 60-acre Metam application through sprinklers last fall. And on a daily basis, we do a sheet. We collect data, we stop, we start, we do whatever it takes. It took almost 4 weeks to do this application. This runs over these notification periods, time periods that I'd have to go out, re-notify, et cetera. So we need to take that into consideration because these applications to do them in small allocations, small lots to make sure that we maintain or we don't do off-gassing, it takes a long time to get across fields. And if we start to have to stop, do re-notification, et cetera, it's going to be considerably difficult. We do go to a grower. We have in Merced County where I have to sign off with my neighbors if I encroach into their buffer zone right now. I'm not sure where we go further. I have to give them a plan. I have to get them to sign off that we've encroached onto their property in a buffer zone. So we have that. So with those items, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Wes Selvage from Button Willow Land and Cattle.
Wes.
Thank you. My name is Wes Selvage, and I'm from Button Willow, California, which is about 30 miles west of Bakersfield. Our name of our company is Button Willow Land and Cattle Company. We are a family operation. We've been on the same land since 1862. That's 153 years. We've been branching and farming there, and I have 9 other partners in my operation. I'm 4th generation, and my grandchildren, who I hope will farm, will be 6 in California. We have been raising. I don't know if I can get this up a little higher. We have been raising carrots and potatoes for the last 30 years as one of the crops or a couple of the crops that we require fumigants. Our experience is with VAPAM to control the nematodes primarily, as well as weeds and diseases. In that 30 years, we have probably made about 1,800 applications of VAPAM or Metam, and we have never had an incident with either our employees or our neighbors. And we have always abided by the rules that are required from the DPR. These chemicals are expensive and probably the most in the budget of raising carrots and potatoes. It's probably the most expensive item that we have. So we are, we're not trying to put these on just because we don't need to. We have looked at alternatives. We are looking at alternatives to fumigants, but and we have had some success in reducing the amount of fumigants that we use, but we have not been able to find any way that we could eliminate them completely. I just had a little visual aid here of why we use the fumigants, and these carrots on the right, if you can see this, are on this side over here are raised with fumigant. These are non-fumigant, which we could probably call organic. And I don't think that, excuse me if I'm turned backwards to the mic, but if you tried to put these in the marketplace, I don't think you would get any housewife to pick that carrot up, regardless if it was called organic or not. So in the organic business, and Kevin can attest to that, you get a lot of this crop because you can't use fumigant. You have to throw this part of it away. It's waste. And so we don't want to go to where we have to raise a lot of this kind of a carrot. And somewhat in the potato industry, it's the same thing. But fumigants are still a tool that we need, so we need to continue to try to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Say that again.
Carrots absorb pesticides.
Carrots absorb pesticides.
Absorb the bad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who do we have next?
David Cox from Leahy Cook Company.
David?
Good morning. I'm David Cox with Leahy Cook Company. I'm one of the principals of that. Leahy Cook Company is a wholesale bare root tree nursery located in Visalia, California. I myself am a fifth-generation California farmer. My family's been here since 1858 in Tulare County on both sides. So we've been here a while. Leahy Cook Company was founded in 1944, so we're not newcomers either. I represent the third generation in the nursery industry, my son the fourth, and his son, hopefully the fifth, at some point in time. We ship nationwide, producing on about 800 acres, employing about 130 people on a year-round basis, adding between another 150 and 175 people at peak season, which is December, January. I'm currently a member of the Improvement Advisory Board for the Fruit, Nut, and Grapevine panel that deals mainly with viruses, but also deals with fumigant issues. As a matter of fact, we're in the process of funding an anaerobic trial right now. I'll tell you about that later. And I was also a core team member for the USDA ARS Pacific Area-wide for methyl bromide alternatives. $5 million, 5 years, dry, nothing. Okay, as a nursery, we've used fumigants for many years because it's required by law. I have to be free of nematodes 5 feet down in the soil in order to ship my product under certification. There is an alternative to doing this though. I don't have to fumigate. I can grow my crop 2 years in the ground, spend $150,000 to $200,000 an acre, root sample, and if they find nematodes, destroy the crop. That's not much of an alternative. So we fumigate. Everyone does. The thing I see with all this notification is I'm having trouble with the science in it. With all with the regulations we have now, they're at least based in some sort of science and help mitigate risk associated with a particular fumigant. What you're contemplating will not squeeze a single drop of risk out of the application process. No one will be any safer for it, but it will generate a lot more paper at the county and state government levels. It will also increase my paper flow, but I know that's not a concern to you. The labels have been developed over the years to revise and tighten risk as they pertain to a given product. To blanket an entire class of product regardless of risk makes no sense to me. While we do take our relationship with our neighbors very seriously and don't want to apply a product in a manner that could harm others, employees or not, and that goes for any product, not just pesticides. I've had to explain that pesticides, because I've used methyl bromide, I've had to explain that to my neighbors. That's not an easy task when you have people who are not familiar with the process. So that is a factor in there too. If I happen to get held up in a fumigation using Telone over having to explain something, I lose soil moisture and have to start all over again. If I can't do it in a timely fashion, then I'm just gone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Brian Van Groningen with Van Groningen and Sons, Inc.
Very good on the pronunciation. Usually don't get that very often, so thank you. My name is Brian Van Groningen. I'm a fourth-generation California farmer. I'm co-owner of a family farm that farms watermelons in the Stockton-Manteca area, and we've been farming watermelons in that area for over 80 years. My family's farm, we've been using pre-plant fumigation for about the last 15 years. The type of fumigation we use is chloropicrin, and we use that also to control soil disease. The application is a water-applied application through a subsurface below-ground drip system. It's a completely closed system application. The fumigant is a liquid that's inserted into the water and then gases off. Our beds are laid with and covered with plastic, and we use TIF film, which is totally impermeable film. And if nobody knows what impermeable means, it means that it cannot penetrate, totally impermeable. So there's a very extreme low probability of off-site movement. And over the last 15 years, we've had 0 incidences of any sort of problem. I'm also a licensed pest control advisor under the state of California. Our family farm employs 500 employees. 150 of those are full-time employees with 0 incidences of any problem with this style of application. My 2 main issues would be, one is why the changes in the regulations with so low incidence of a problem, moving the buffer zone from 100 to 400 feet with 0 employee safety related issues. I feel that's an undue concern. My other issue would be also, like as mentioned before, the general public not understanding the purpose of the fumigation and also how the fumigant works and the application style. I'll use an example. 2 weeks ago, we just fumigated a site for a watermelon crop. I had 6 notifications that I was required to do. 1 out of the 6, a gentleman's name is Jose Martinez. He does not live in the area. He only frequents that property that was adjacent to mine on Saturdays and Sundays. I had to find him on Saturday, finally found him after about a week's worth of phone calls and effort. He was very concerned and asked me, why all of a sudden do I have to be notified? How long have you been doing fumigation? I said, I've been doing it for 15 years. He says, well, why all of a sudden after 15 years do I have to be notified? I said, it's the change in regulation. So a lot of people do not understand why we're notifying them, and it's raising a lot of concern.
Thank you, Brian.
Our next presenter is Cynthia Corey from CFBF.
Good morning. I want to thank everybody who came. I hope everyone has been able to realize how complex this issue is, and I'm glad that we have a lot of interest in it. I just have 3 quick points. One of the things I noticed as we've gone through this morning is we're taking a methyl bromide regulation that was put in place in 2001, so that was 14 years ago. And there's been a lot of science. As Mike Milano said, it's so fast, DPR can't even keep up. We've got all this technology, TIF. This methyl bromide notification was put in 14 years ago before we had all of these new mitigation measures, and especially the new ones on the label requirements. So why are we going back 14 years and saying, oh, that was a good idea for something that didn't have any mitigation that we're now using, and we're going to expand it? I just don't think that makes any sense. The panel that talked about alternatives, I think anybody in this room would use an alternative if they could. We have spent a lot of time and money, and we will continue to do that. We would love to find a viable, cost-effective alternative. But as we all know, we're looking at coconut substrate that costs what, Brian, $20,000, $40,000 an acre? Solarization, if that worked, we got plenty of sun. That would be great. The anaerobic soil disinfestation that was talked about, just so you know what that is. That's basically taking a lot of water, a half an acre foot of water, and applying it in addition to the water that's needed by strawberries now. So I don't know if anybody heard, but we're in a drought. So I don't think that's really a viable alternative. Also, the decomposition of the organic matter that happens during this soil disinfestation creates greenhouse gas, which has also been determined by the state to cause climate change. So if we had a viable alternative, we would be using anaerobic soil disinfectation, but it's not working. We don't have the water to do that. The last thing I want to say is, I know that Eric said more than once, we need to develop uniform notification, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. When we need to notify, it needs to be uniform, and I stand ready, working with Farm Bureau and representing those farmers to help develop a uniform notification system when it is needed. And the current regs allow us to do notification if that's the option you want, or you do field monitoring with these extensive fumigant plans and all these mitigation measures in place. We think that we need to stay there. And I just stand ready to let you know that we support uniform notification, but we do not support mandatory notification.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Pearl Kahn from the California Rural Legal Assistance.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Pearl Kahn. I'm an attorney with California Rural Legal Assistance in the Salinas office, and I represent farm workers who have been exposed to pesticide drift. Fumigant notification needs to be maintained as a separate right to know requirement. Now, a lot of people have been talking about sound science, and the battle of the experts is for another day, but the right to know and the access to information should be a freestanding right. Access to information, I don't think anybody can argue with, is fundamental for an informed, participatory, robust democracy and citizenship. Where I work in Monterey County, fumigants are applied in massive quantities. In 2012, half of the 9.2 million pounds of ag pesticides applied in Monterey County alone came from but 5 fumigants: chlorpicrin, telone, methylbromide, metamsodium, and metapotassium. Fumigants are linked to cancer, reproductive problems, and developmental harm. In this context, scientifically and practically speaking, rural residents who live and work and go to school have an affirmative right to know when this is happening. That's all we're asking for, is when these highly toxic, highly volatile pesticides are scheduled to be applied near their communities. As my colleague mentioned, it simply gives people the ability to make a choice. As such, notification should be maintained as a separate right to know requirement, and it should be extended to all fumigants, not just methylbromide. In addition, the notification process for all fumigants should be provided to possible affected parties within 1 mile of planned field fumigation. Similarly, follow-up notification should be automatic and not follow the methylbromide operation, rather than available only upon request. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rachel O'Brien from the Agricultural Council of California.
Sorry about that. Good morning, Director Leahy, DPR staff. My name is Rachel O'Brien. I'm with the Agricultural Council of California. The Agricultural Council represents approximately 15,000 farmers across the state of California, ranging from small family-owned farms to some of the world's best-known brands. Our farm workers work diligently to protect the safety of workers, our families, and the surrounding neighborhoods. Our farm families live in these neighborhoods, so safety is very important to us. In the case of these additional notification requirements being discussed today, we do have concerns. First, simply notifying the public that a fumigant application is taking place will not improve consumer safety, and it could create other challenges, as have been mentioned, and confusion. Public and worker safety is achieved through regulations and restrictions that DPR has already put in place, and the fumigant applications themselves and all fumigants must be applied by certified commercial applicators who are approved by the state, they're approved by manufacturers, and receive ongoing training and continuing education. It's important to note that it is not unusual for fumigant applications to be delayed because of weather conditions or equipment that need repair. This would potentially cause alarm for issues that are essentially beyond our control. I'll just, in closing, kind of urge DPR to focus on regulations that are proven to truly improve public and worker safety. And in closing, ask that you continue to work with the grower community as this process unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will need translation services, Minerva Contreras.
Yep.
Our next speaker is Samuel Segawa from Padres. I will need translation services.
Okay. Welcome.
Muy buenos días, mi nombre es Samuel Segura. Yo vengo de Lamont, en el estado de del condado de Kern, y vengo porque tenemos serios problemas con respecto a la aplicación de pesticidas. Esto es porque todos nos dicen que tienen cuidado, pero realmente cuando el suelo se seca y tratan otra vez la tierra, eso levanta polvo y el pueblo donde yo vivo, porque es un pueblo chiquito, es demasiado pequeño y hay realmente, si ustedes ven aire, se cierra, se pone café. ¿Ustedes creen que eso no va a causar enfermedades en los residentes de ese lugar? Causa muchas enfermedades. Yo sufro de migrañas. Yo sufro de dolores muy intensos de cabeza que muchas veces ni siquiera con medicamentos se me calman. Tengo familiares que tienen hijos con autismo. Yo creo que eso son personas que trabajan en el field de 25 años y casualidad que cuando ellos vinieron de México, sus primeros hijos no nacieron mal, pero los últimos 3 sí. Si ustedes creen que esto no causa problemas, son casos no reportados, son casos que se tienen afuera de la vista del público, que realmente los únicos que lo sabemos y que los vivimos somos las gentes que están ahí, en esos condados, en esos pueblos escondidos. Yo no digo que es malo las granjas de zanahorias, las granjas de sandías. Realmente lo que usan es lo malo. Necesitamos la comida, estoy consciente. Lo que necesitamos también es cuidar nuestra salud y la salud de los demás, porque no vengo a hablar por mí, vengo a hablar por mucha gente. Gracias.
Good morning, my name is Samuel Segura, and I'm here from the town of Lamont, that is in the county of Kern. And the reason I am here is because we have been seeing some serious issues as regards the application of pesticides in our community. And many people who have spoken before me have stated or spoken to the fact that they are very careful in their application, but when the soil dries up and then they treat the land again, this creates a lot of dust and it becomes fugitive. And I come from a very small town, and if you had a chance to go out there and visit this very small town, when this happens, the air turns completely brown. I mean, you can visibly see it. Do you honestly believe that this is not going to cause illness for the people that live there? It has been causing a lot of diseases. I suffer from migraines and very intense headaches that sometimes will not go away, even with the use of medication. I also have relatives who have children with autism. There are families who are being affected by working on the fields. They've been doing so for like 25 years. When they first came from Mexico, their first children were perfectly fine, and it so happens that after they started working the fields, the 3 youngest children are. So if you think that it's not causing an issue, it is. I mean, a lot of these are unreported cases. These are things that are happening outside of people's sight. Generally, the only people who are aware of this and who live through this are the people who live there in these counties, in these hidden small towns. I'm not saying that having carrot farming and watermelon farming is a bad thing. What they are using is what's harmful. I'm aware that we need food and we need their operations, but we also need to protect our health and the health of our people, because I'm not here just to speak on my own behalf. I'm speaking for a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank both of you.
Our next speaker is Minerva Contreras.
No todo el párrafo. Okay, por favor. Buenos días, mi nombre es Minerva Contreras. Yo también vengo del condado de Kern, de Lamont. Estoy aquí porque formo parte de un pequeño grupo de padres que estamos preocupados por la salud de nuestros hijos. Estoy escuchando en muchas ocasiones a ustedes diciendo que en el estado de California están las leyes más estrictas sobre los pesticidas. Y por otro lado, escucho a personas que creen que están haciendo lo correcto y por otro lado, escucho a personas que creen que no es así. Yo solamente soy una madre preocupada y de verdad, quisiera decir tantas cosas y dar tantos ejemplos, pero solo quiero decir que estoy aquí representando muchos casos que veo a diario en mi comunidad, que lo sentimos como familia, lo respiramos, se impregna en nuestra ropa, los niños vienen de las escuelas y el olor de la ropa no se quita. Quiero decir, por favor, que necesitamos ayuda. No sé de quién, no sé qué tanta gente esté aquí interesada en ayudarnos, pero necesitamos ayuda. Estamos muriendo lentamente. Todos estamos enfermos. Perdón, no sé si quiere ayudarme.
Hi, good morning. My name is Minerva Contreras, and I am also here from Kern County, from Lamont. And the reason that I'm here today is because I am part of a small group of parents who are concerned with our children's health. I've heard from a lot of people who have talked about the fact that we have the strictest regulations in the state of California and regarding pesticides. And I've also heard from people who attest to the fact that they're doing things right. But I've also heard from people who are concerned with this not truly being that way. But I'm here merely as a concerned parent. And we are feeling these effects in our community. I am basically here to represent a lot of cases that I see every day in my community. And we suffer the effects as a family. We have to breathe this stuff. It sticks to our clothes. When our kids come home from school, you can't get that smell out of their clothes. And I want to ask you to please help us. I don't know who is all here today, who all is willing to help, but we do need help. We are slowly dying in our community. We're all sick. And
también quiero decir que nosotros como residentes entendemos perfectamente que la agricultura es necesaria para la vida diaria y también sabemos que los fumigantes son necesarios también para la agricultura, pero si ustedes dicen que existen leyes estrictas en California, créanme que en mi comunidad no se están cumpliendo. No, en mi comunidad no se está cumpliendo con esas reglas. Cuando escucho a un ranchero decir que hizo una prueba con agua de un helicóptero y que solo era para probar al vecino o algo, el ejemplo que dio, vino a mi mente un caso y eso fue apenas caso personal, no estoy hablando de alguien más. Manejaba de Lamont a Bakersfield y al lado de la carretera se veía una avioneta fumigando algo y mi niña emocionada decía, "Ma, parece que está cayendo confeti, está bonito, está cayendo confeti", porque en el carro pegaban las bolitas blancas de pesticidas. Y cuando, perdón, pero el traductor, no sé si tengo más tiempo, después mi hijo, el más grande, dice, no, rápido, cierra las puertas del carro porque eso es pesticida. Perdón, no sé si quiera decirle que por el traductor, no sé.
My apologies if I went over, but the exchange with the interpreter also takes some time. But I wanted to say that, just to give you an example, someone was talking about an example with a helicopter and the psychological effects on the water. But, this is something that happened to me. I was driving with my daughter and we were riding down the highway and there was a plane that was actually spraying pesticide. And my daughter was saying, "Oh, look, Mom, it's beautiful. It almost looks like confetti's being dropped." Because you have these white droplets that were hitting the car. And my older son, who understands it a little better, then says, no, close the windows. That's a pesticide.
Pero, por favor, explique que también entendemos que
But we also understand that, agriculture is necessary, for our society, and we know that they have to use fumigants. But when you speak of the fact that, we have the strictest requirements in the state of California, we don't see them being complied with necessarily in our community.
De verdad, no quiero gastar mucho tiempo. Sé que tienen reglas, pero especialmente a las personas que no están de acuerdo con las notificaciones, quiero decir, por favor, que yo sé que los reglamentos y los pesticidas no van a erradicar y los reglamentos no van a pasar de la noche a la mañana, pero creo que las notificaciones sería una opción para nuestros estudiantes, para las escuelas, para tal vez evitar salir ese día, como dijeron otras personas. Creo que por algo tenemos que empezar. Para mí, como persona que lo estoy viviendo, creo que las notificaciones es un punto muy importante que tenemos que empezar. También otras personas decían que era como espantar o asustar más a la comunidad, pero y también otras decían que estamos mal informados y que no entendemos. Créanme, lo entendemos. Sabemos que hay un proceso para los pesticidas, pero también queremos esa opción. Queremos que nos notifiquen para así saber qué opción tomar.
And I'm sorry, and I know that there are people who spoke about not disagreeing with having further notification, but let me tell you that while I know that regulations and rules are not going to be changed overnight, I think that in the meantime, notifications are a great starting point, a great option for us, for schools, for students. At least we'd be able to avoid going outside those days and have some sort of informed decision. For me as an individual that's living through this, I think that notification is a very important first step, a good starting point. And for those that were saying that we are misinformed, that would scare us because we don't know what's going on, trust me, we do know, and we do realize what's going on. So notifications would be a good option for us to at least have the alternative to decide.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
We have one more, Carlos. Valerie Gersope from CPR CRPE. Okay. Thank you.
Valerie, can you the acronym. Can you list what that is?
Sure. So it's Valerie Gillespie with Californians for Pesticide Reform and the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment. I'm actually hesitant to introduce myself as an employee for CPR or CRPE because what I'm going to say is more of a personal experience. And more of who I am the proud daughter of Teresa de Anda. So I'd like to refer to the quote-unquote emotional dots that were referred to earlier. And also the quote of, "We don't want a crisis." In my experience, there is a crisis, there has been a crisis. On the street where I grew up alone, alone on the street where I grew up, and where I still go regularly. I grew up on the very first street that was impacted by the November 1999 incident in early March. And I also kept hearing today the term unintended consequences. I'd like to talk about those unintended consequences that are very real to my family and family friends on the street where I grew up. Just last week, my aunt down the street was diagnosed with kidney cancer. In the same house, my uncle has had prostate cancer and is a quote-unquote survivor. My cousin had juvenile diabetes and had a kidney transplant because of the diabetes. And my cousin, who would make a great and wonderful mother, is unable to have children. There's reproductive cancer on that next door to them. And just on my lot alone, my grandpa from the Philippines built 2 apartments for his compadres, and my grandpa and my 2 uncles had prostate cancer. Also in the house, we have autism, liver cancer, chronic respiratory illnesses, and right next door we have breast cancer. Now, are all of these illnesses caused by fumigants? I don't know, but I do know that these fumigants are carcinogens and have known carcinogens, and that is scientific. Another thing that I heard today was, where do we draw the line? That's a good question. Where do we draw the line when it comes to human impact and health impact on real families and real children and real adults that are losing their loved ones? I've also heard today the term that it's a complex process. A complex process to me is explaining to my kids over and over, what is cancer? What does cancer look like? And what it's doing to our family. I also heard today that people come and go. My question to that is, are people in our family leaving too early? And why are they leaving early? And I'll conclude with this, with notification. We need to know. We have a right to know, just based on these experiences of my family and my health alone. The robocall is a good idea. Schools use this. I'm in support of this robocall that we can do. And I understand, and my mom was the first to say, that we're not trying to make ranchers and farmers the villain. We're not trying to take their jobs away or take that away. We need that. It's integral to our valley. It's integral to our valley economy. So we need to work together. We need to figure something out. And lastly, the supposed 1% of the people that don't care about notification, I personally invite you to come to my street, come to Lamont, come to Arvin, Delano, Early Mart, and let's see who cares, and let's see how much, if that really is 1% who doesn't care about the fumigant notifications. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is John Giriard from Grimway Farms.
Hi, my name is John Gerard from Grimway Farms, and as Kevin mentioned earlier, we are grow a diversity of vegetable crops, both conventionally and organic. But on the conventional side, we primarily use, when necessary or if needed, we'll use metam sodium or telone for fumigation purposes. And we are very concerned about the safety of these products. We are concerned about this drift and off-site movement, and we're very careful to follow these regulations that even our Ruben has put out additional permit conditions that we follow, and we use commercial applicators for all these applications and are following the buffer zones. But one of the concerns we have is that we're fighting weather conditions, especially in the summertime, and we have to monitor the soil moisture properly. We have to make sure the air temperatures and the soil temperatures are correct for fumigation. And if we're delayed for any reason, we're concerned about these notifications because what they might entail as far as possibly delaying the fumigation, or if we're delayed for weather reasons for 12 or 24 hours, we're concerned that we may have to just start re-notifying again and go through the process all over. We don't believe that metam and telone are in the same category as methyl bromide as far as human health is concerned. We feel that the current monitoring is adequate and the current notification is, and that the risk mitigation measures already deal with these risks and emergencies that we're dealing with. We don't really feel that this additional notification is really necessary. Will it really improve the public safety? Is it more likely to scare or confuse consumers or infer that they're in danger or that somehow their health is being compromised? Those are questions we need to ask. We're concerned that a lot of this misinformation about these fumigants will ensue. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Donald Noreen from Noreen Ranches, Inc.
Good morning, Director Leahy. My name is Donald Noreen. I reside in Rio Oso, California, farm under the name of Noreen Ranches, Inc., as well as Donald and Sandy Noreen. I've been a lifelong farmer, began farming with my father in 1973 after college. We've used fumigants successfully since 1977. I personally have been involved in fumigation with methyl bromide, metam sodium, chloropicrin, and the incorporation of telone after commercially fumigated. I am personally involved in the notification process for neighbors within the buffer zone. The current buffer zone is designated for methyl bromide, is at least in our area, in our county community, is adequate. I don't see the prospects of an expanded notification area having the merit. In discussions with neighbors and community folks that reside alongside me, the appreciation and the understanding of what we're doing is, if oftentimes missed. I worry that when expanded, we take on that initiative of the Proposition 65 notification, where not only does what we're telling our neighbors and our community members become irrelevant, that the difficulty in the understanding of why the state of California would mandate these increased buffer zones to folks leads to just the irrelevance of the issue. So I would ask you to maintain the current buffer zones. Our time personally spent monitoring our work, doing the work in a timely manner, makes it more efficient, more effective, and makes for a safer application. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Florentino, retired military.
Florentino Hernandez from Central Valley, and we need to have like a mild buffer zone for these applications, for schools, any place people congregate. Then we need to find other alternatives, environmentally friendly alternatives to the fumigants for the health of the planet and our communities, ourselves.
Thank you very much.
Our next presenter is Paul Wigner from California Farm Bureau.
Hi, my name is Paul Weimer, President of California Farm Bureau, also a licensed pest control operator in Modesto. I've been doing that license with the state of California since 1984 and getting in here late, working on some of the drought issues. You know, to hear some of the stories, I mean, you have to have empathy for folks that are having issues, health issues. But again, just like a lot of the folks that were bombarding the Capitol yesterday worried about immunizations and possible effects of immunizations, we know that with the technologies we have today, we do it better. We have longer, healthier lives, even though many of us are going to be confronted with cancer and other medical anomalies. We don't know what those are from, but a lot of it is because we're living longer lives than what we did 200-300 years ago. When it comes to the fumigants, my very real concern is give people the choice. We are a very diverse state, our crops and where we, and you know, really between our urban and rural interface, it's worked very well. For notification, to make it mandatory that you contact everybody, one would be very difficult. And again, you're making them worried about something they probably don't need to worry about. The other issue is who's going to notify, and then the subjects of lawsuits, because somebody can say, I didn't get a notification, and again, they weren't necessarily exposed or anything, but they could file a claim saying that, well, we weren't duly notified, I wasn't home, I didn't get the robocall. And then when you have people knocking on doors, I don't think anybody today wants somebody knocking on their door to notify them of something that, so what's the problem? So are we really making a problem by having the mandatory notification? I think posting works very well. And as I've seen throughout the agricultural community and for a lot of our farms, the folks that work on our farms, you have to be very careful, the signal words and the things that you do, because folks figure out right away that if we call everything bad, and then they assume right away, and then they say, well, you know what, we can take shortcuts because that product really wasn't that bad. I think we've done a great thing here with Department of Pesticide Regulation and going through with the registrants to figure out where our exposures are. And we are doing a very good job, unlike anybody else in the United States or the world, to make sure that not only our farm workers and our people in our rural areas are protected, but those in our urban areas that might have that ag-urban interface. And so we would just say that give folks the option to post where it's appropriate and let them notify where that's appropriate by other means, but to make it mandatory that they do both not only doesn't accomplish a purpose, but could create more problems and dissension than is really required. So thank you for the hearing today.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Our next speaker is Maria Barajas, and we need translation. Maria will keep, if in the interest of time, we will keep your comments to 3 minutes and another 3 minutes for the translation, so a total of 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Hola, buenas tardes o buenos días. Mi nombre es María Barajas. Yo vengo de la comunidad de Plenvío en el condado de Tulare. Mi comunidad es muy pequeña y todos nos conocemos allí, pero estamos rodeados de files y es muy bonita la agricultura, muy lindo. Pero si nosotros recibiéramos una notificación de que se va a tirar pesticidas, se van a aplicar pesticidas o cualquier químico, yo en primer lugar les diría a mis nietos, no vengas a mi casa, esta semana van a tirar pesticidas. Pero si no como ha pasado muchos años, cuando yo tenía mis hijas chicas, hoy hay que cerrar la ventana porque están tirando pesticidas. Si hubiéramos tenido una notificación, no cierro la ventana, me voy de la casa por unos días. Entonces yo pienso que la notificación sería una buena ayuda para nuestras comunidades. Les agradezco su tiempo y muchas gracias.
Good morning, my name is Maria Barajas, and I'm here from Tulare County, and I come from a very small community, and we're surrounded by agricultural fields. We think that agriculture is wonderful and it's very necessary, but if we were able to have notification when they're going to have fumigant applications or any other sort of chemical, it would be great. It would allow us to make decisions. I could tell my grandchildren, hey, don't come visit me this week, for example. There's going to be an application. And, you know, for many years what happened, even when I had my children, when they were small, all of a sudden they would run and close the windows and go, oh, you know, they're fumigating. But if we had notifications, we could have left the house for a few days. So having notification would be a great tool for us. Thank you very much for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you.
And Brian, our last speaker is Paul Towers from PAN.
How did he work that?
No one else? Great. Well, I will try to sum up or close. So again, my name is Paul Towers. I work with Pesticide Action Network North America. We have about 110,000 members in California and across the country. We're part of a global network that works to advance socially just, environmentally sound solutions to hazardous pesticides. Our constituents and members are small-scale farmers, farm workers, and indigenous communities, and rural frontline communities. So we tend to try and represent from the get-go a commonality among all those interests. What I find really exciting today, to just sort of start on a positive note, is I think we're fundamentally in this room all committed to prosperous, sustainable agriculture here in California. And I think, I guess I fundamentally reject the notion that this has anything to do with, farms versus communities, ag versus communities. I think that's a farce. So we should just throw that out the window. Modern farming, sustainable modern farming, has to be socially just, environmentally sound. I think that's where we're all headed. We have to be headed to keep farming prosperous in this state. And so I think with that in mind, we have to recognize that we're here today because fumigants are difficult, if not impossible, to control. They're highly hazardous. They're linked to a wide range of health harms, everything from cancer to developmental impacts, neurological impacts. That's not modern. That's not sustainable. And so when we think about where we're headed with chlorpicrin, T-Lone, Metam, all of these things, we have to think about what's the arc for investing in truly sustainable alternatives and solutions that get us off of those. And along the way, we need to recognize that notification for our communities to take things into their own hands, to protect themselves and their families. Notification is a right to make those choices, to make those decisions, those informed decisions. So teachers, parents, farm workers, farmers all have this right to make those informed decisions to protect themselves and their families. So this needs to be a step along that arc towards finding that shared solution. So I think in our commitment, we know that we can find something better, that we can do farming across the state better. I say this as someone who just 2 weeks ago helped pass an urban ag ordinance here in Sacramento, who I spend my weekends working on farms of my family and my colleagues. I think we recognize that that's our shared vision. So I hope that people understand that the multitude of communities we are here with and represent, we share that vision. We want to work towards it. We're happy to sit down in any room, closet, any place you'll take us to find that. But along the way, we have to give people the right information to make the right decisions. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So I think, do we have anyone else? Is it, okay.
We do have a statement.
We have a statement.
From Senator Jackson.
Okay.
And I unplugged it. He would like to submit to the California Department of Pesticide Regulations workshop to develop regulation concepts for field mitigation notifications. Field fumigation notifications. There you go. Will the statement be read during the workshop? Yes. Oh, I have a...
1 second. We have to click.
Hang on. I thought that was causing the problems, was me plugged into the laptop, but maybe not. I thought that was causing the problems.
Oh, wow. There's an echo.
And feedback. Okay. Oh, yeah, we have some additional.
There, do you have the letter?
I have the letter.
But it's supposed to be, is it guest?
Oh, then there are different organizations who will be submitting comments.
Okay, yeah. We are not done here. We are just starting.
A number of groups, including Coalition for Clean Air and the Environmental Working Group and a number of other organizations are interested in submitting written comments.
Okay. Are we gonna, what are we doing here?
Maybe you are flickering again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Supposed to be guest.
I'm guest.
You're a guest.
Did we turn off though? I will read it.
Okay, thank you.
Since my days as an assembly member, I have been concerned with pesticide applications near schools, homes, parks, and workplaces. Today, regulation for field fumigation notifications is dangerously inadequate in helping neighboring communities protect their health. My district includes Ventura County, which has the most number of schools and students within a quarter mile of where some of the most potentially harmful pesticides are used, more than any other county in the state. We are now learning that pesticides applied to strawberry fields near a high school in my district with 2,100 students are being utilized at even higher levels than originally acceptable in 2002. In this incident, it became evident that the safety controls required for using a particular fumigant are failing, putting the health of our youth and their teachers at risk. This is not acceptable. I respectfully urge the Department of Pesticide Regulation to bolster its current regulation for field fumigation notifications to better protect public health. If state air monitoring shows increased levels of fumigants in air, DPR must ensure that local decision makers and residents are notified immediately. DPR must ensure that advance notifications are provided in places within a reasonable vicinity to where fumigants and other pesticides are utilized. These notifications must be written, bilingual, and generally accessible to the community. Furthermore, I strongly recommend that instead of placing the burden on residents to seasonally seek out these notifications, the current methyl bromide policy in place, the department develop a process that guarantees residents receive these notifications automatically. Specific information about the fumigant used, including immediate symptoms of exposure and chronic health risks, should accompany contact information for county agricultural commissioners, as well as an explanation of the state's pesticide drift emergency medical reimbursement process. Finally, it is critical that DPR provide additional notifications for students, parents, patients, and employees in particularly sensitive populations such as schools and hospitals. The department should work with these institutions, especially schools, so they are equipped to efficiently distribute these health and safety notifications. These are just a few of the important ways in which we can ensure that these potentially dangerous pesticides are used responsibly. It is my hope and expectation that DPR will meet this mandate to protect public health and at the same time meet the agricultural community's needs. Respectfully submitted, Hannah Beth Jackson.
Okay, so to sum up, see, I've been a farmer, I've been a legal aid attorney, a poverty lawyer, I run a nonprofit, and I've been a parent. Raising kids is hard. But the regulation of pesticides is really difficult, and it can only be done through full participation of the people involved, which is everyone in the state. So I want to really thank you for coming today, for sharing. People come a long way. We're not done here. We're going to do more hearings or more listening sessions. We'll have an open process through the regulations. And I really would like it if you would really think about what is meaningful communications, notification, and how do you do it in a way that is actually doable and enforceable. So start thinking about that, and then we're going to be working on this for a while. So thank you all for coming today.
And a reminder for everyone to please sign in so we have your name and information. And also for our webinar, Randy will be redoing his presentation.
Okay, and for the Spanish translation, thank you very much. That was incredible. That was really meaningful. Oh, I'm supposed to, okay. Here's our next one.
Wiggle the camera if you can hear me.
It's not advancing. Oh, there it is. Okay. I can't advance. Oh, advance. Go ahead. Go to the next one. Okay. Go to the next one. Okay. Fumigants are applied prior to planting to control weeds, diseases, nematodes, and insects, particularly for fields that are difficult to control these pests. The photo shows some verticillium damage in a strawberry field that was not fumigated. As you can see, there can be some significant damage when fields are not fumigated. Next. Fumigants are injected into the soil prior to planting, either with a tractor or through drip irrigation systems, and are usually covered with a tarp, as seen in the two photos below. Next. Fumigants are essentially gases, and they're applied at high rates, and this can cause potential exposure to bystanders and residents. A number of the fumigants are among the top pesticides used in California. The table there shows the fumigants that are of concern right now. They include 1,3-dichloropropene, commonly known as Telone, as well as pesticides that generate methyl isothiocyanate, or MITC, and those include metam-potassium, metam-sodium, and Dazomet. The fumigants also include chloropicrin and methyl bromide. Next. All pesticides are regulated by 3 different agencies. US EPA prescribes their requirements on labels, and these labels specify the maximum amounts that can be applied, the fumigation methods that can be used, the crops that can be treated, and other safety precautions. The fumigant labels also include protections specifically to address bystanders and residents, such as buffer zones. Next, the second agency is DPR. DPR can prescribe regulations that are stricter than what's currently on the labels, and we have such regulations for methyl bromide. In addition, all fumigants are designated as California restricted materials. This means that an application must be supervised or made by a certified applicator, and that a permit is required before the application. That permit must be evaluated by the County Agricultural Commissioner, and that's the third agency involved in regulation of pesticides. The County Ag Commissioner has authority to require more stringent requirements than either DPR regulations or the labels. The applicator and grower must follow the most stringent application requirements, whether they're specified by labels, regulations, or permit conditions. Next. Now, in the case of the fumigants, there are label requirements that include emergency preparedness and response measures. And these label requirements apply to products containing chloropicrin, methyl bromide, the pesticides that generate MITC, but 1,3-D products are excluded from these requirements. These emergency preparedness measures are not required for applications that have a buffer zone with a minimum distance of 25 feet. But if the buffer zone is larger than 25 feet, then a certified applicator must either provide notification to neighbors or conduct sensory monitoring if there are residences or businesses within a certain distance. And the table there shows the trigger distances for these emergency response measures. For instance, if the buffer zone is greater than 25 feet but less than 100 feet, then if there are any residences or businesses within 50 feet of the buffer zone, either the notification must be provided or monitoring must be conducted. The labels do not have these emergency preparedness requirements for schools or other sites that are classified as difficult to evacuate. For these sites, the labels specify greater protections, a greater distance between the fumigated area and the location of schools and other difficult to evacuate sites. Next. When the grower applicator is required to implement these emergency preparedness measures and chooses to provide the notification, then that notification must be provided in English through a mailing or door hanger at least 1 week prior to the fumigation. That notification must include information on the location of the fumigation, the product that's being applied, contact information both for the applicator and the property owner, the time period when that fumigation may occur, and that time period can be within a 4-week window. The notification must also include the signs and symptoms of fumigant exposure and how to find additional information about fumigants. Next. Those are the label requirements. In California, we also have regulations for methyl bromide that includes notification. This is notification that's required to go to schools, residences, hospitals, and convalescent homes within 300 feet of the buffer zone. When the notification is triggered, the property operator must provide notification in English and in Spanish at least 9 days before the fumigation occurs. And that fumigation notification must include the name of the fumigant, the contact information for the property owner as well as the ag commissioner, the time period when that application may occur, and how to request subsequent notification of the specific date and time. So for these methyl bromide regulations, this is a 2-tier notification. The initial notification occurs 9 days before the fumigation. Then if requested, a specific notification must be provided that indicates a 12-hour window when that fumigation occurs, and that notification must be provided at least 48 hours before fumigation. Next. And so this figure illustrates the notification that occurs both on the labels, which is shown in the top figure, as well as DPR's regulation, which is shown in the bottom figure. In the center, the green rectangle represents the fumigated area. It's surrounded by a buffer zone indicated by the green line. And so within this buffer zone, there can't be any residences, any people in adjoining fields, no schools. Only the people involved with the application is allowed to be inside the buffer zone. Next. Outside the buffer zone is what you might call a notification zone. On a label, this is referred to as emergency and response area. That area can be anywhere from 50 to 300 feet from the buffer zone, depending on the size of the buffer zone. In the case of DPR's regulation, that notification zone is 300 feet from the buffer zone. Next. When you have residences or businesses within these trigger distances, then the label requires notification in English, whereas DPR's regulations requires notification in English as well as in Spanish, and DPR's notification also goes to schools. Next. In the case of the labels, rather than providing notification, an extra distance is provided. Fumigations cannot occur if there's a school or other difficult to evacuate sites within 660 feet or 1/8 mile when the buffer zone is less than 300 feet, or 1320 feet or 1/4 mile when the buffer zone is greater than 300 feet. Next. So that covers the current requirements. There are some other issues associated with notification, particularly the compliance and enforcement issues. There can be difficulty in notifying certain properties, such as those that are gated. There can be difficulty in determining who is the appropriate person to notify, particularly with properties such as apartment complexes where you have multiple people. And then confirming that notification was required can also be difficult. In some cases, a grower may provide the notification, but the residents didn't receive it. And so when the county ag commissioner investigates, it's difficult to determine who is at fault here. Schools are a special case, and they will be addressed in a separate regulation specifically for schools. Next. To summarize then, the current requirements, there are both label requirements as well as requirements under DPR's regulations. Under the labels, the fumigants include chlorpicrin, Dazamit and Metam that generate the MITC as well as methyl bromide. DPR's regulations include only methyl bromide. And so T-Lone and other 1,3-D products are currently excluded from notification under both the labels and the regulations. In terms of the purpose of notifications, that's also different. For the labels, the notification is for emergency preparedness reasons, whereas under DPR's regulations, it's a right to know. The properties are notified are slightly different. For the labels, residents and businesses must be notified, whereas under DPR's regulations, the schools, residences, hospitals, and convalescent homes. The distance at which the notification occurs is different. For the labels, it's 50 to 300 feet, depending on the size of the buffer zone. And for residents and businesses within those trigger distances, it's an option to either notify or conduct monitoring. Under DPR's regulations, the trigger distance is 300 feet of the buffer zone. The time that the notification occurs is similar, 1 week prior to fumigation for the labels, at least 9 days prior to fumigation for DPR's regulations. However, DPR's regulations include a second notification, at least 2 days prior to fumigation, in which the specific date and time of the fumigation is given. But that second notification is only given if requested. The fumigation schedule or fumigation time window under the labels, the notification provides a 4-week window for that fumigation to occur, whereas under DPR's regulation, it's a 12-hour window if the specific notification is requested. The notification for the labels is provided in English only, whereas under DPR's regulation, notification is provided in both English and in Spanish. In terms of how that notification occurs, the two requirements are similar. For the labels, it's either mailings or door hangers or other similar means. For DPR's regulation, it's also in writing or other means approved by the Agricultural Commissioner. Next. In terms of what the notification contains, there are some differences. Both the label and DPR's regulation require the fumigant name, but the labels require the location of the fumigation, whereas DPR's regulations do not. There's contact information required under both notification requirements. The labels do not require the specific fumigation date. It gives a 4-week window, while DPR's regulations do require the specific date and time if requested. The EPA labels also provide information on signs and symptoms of exposure and how to find more information, whereas DPR's regulations do not require that. Next. That's it. You can provide or get more information from DPR's website at the link shown there. Next. In terms of the next steps, we do anticipate additional regional workshops throughout the state in late fall, and then that would be followed by proposed regulation in spring of 2016, and then the regulation would go into effect probably in the winter of 2016 and 2017. Next. And then finally, again, there's a website that gives additional information, and if you would like to submit comments on any of this, you can send them to me either at the address there or to my email address. So.
Randy, the audience thanks you for redoing your presentation,
Okay.
and thank you.
Sure.